All right, good morning. Welcome to the Gresham-Barlow Board of Education Board Policy Committee meeting. This morning in attendance, Chris Howitt, and Dr. Tracy Klinger. Absent is Myra Gomez. Special guest this morning is Dr. Tim Collins. We'll be going over policy GBEB, IIA, IKF, JBAA, JEA, JEA-AR. The purpose of this policy committee meeting is to review the policies as recommended by either change in law, statute, or recommendation from OSBA, and they go to the full board for review and adoption. So this morning, we will start off, I believe, we're going to go ahead and start off with IIA, instructional materials, since we have our guest, Dr. Collins, here. And this is an existing policy that is being rewritten with new proposed language. So, Dr. Collins. Okay, so.
Thank you. Actually, Tracy,
I'll get it started.
Okay.
This is one of the policies that has a delete the old policy and have a new policy or an updated one. And there's several brackets that we'll need to go through and we can do that. The overall big picture of this in terms of the changes that I see are really around differentiating between a core adopted instructional material and then supplemental instructional materials that a classroom teacher or a school might use to supplement the district adopted curriculum. And then similarly with library, that there's school library materials that have a process, but there are also classroom library materials that a teacher kind of vets on their own. And so it really helps define those things, which I think is helpful for us in the long run and was reflected some in our AR.
Okay.
So if we look through this and just kind of start at the top and start working through, there are a number of brackets. So even in that first paragraph, so Tim, with brackets, we basically decide yes or no that we want to include the bracketed language.
I would think yes, because it falls within what we're trying to do across all of our operations.
Yeah.
And I think spelling it out as well. So is it one bracket or another?
So there's two brackets there in the first paragraph, and I would recommend accepting both of them.
Okay, that's what it looks like. Perfect. Okay.
And then third paragraph, this policy is not intended to cover classroom activities. Complaints regarding classroom activities unrelated to materials can be filed using other established district complaint procedures.
Right.
I would say yes to that because essentially we're trying to separate out the curriculum complaints from KL and other types of complaints. So it helps clarify that. So I would recommend that.
Okay.
I do not see any others on the
there was
first
something,
page.
I just put a little asterisk next to the one that was the last paragraph on the first page that the materials are not adopted by the board, but that's not bracketed language. That's just good language in there. So they're considered one that's supplemental instructional.
One that's supplemental.
Yes, yes.
And I think some of those are good differentiators for the public and for staff.
Right, because then it goes on to the next page, same thing, talking about school library and classroom library.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So then under the section core instructional materials, I would recommend that we add the or designee, because typically there's someone in my current role that is doing the curriculum adoption work with the team.
Okay.
I would also recommend that we include students. We have been doing that as a part of our practice.
So there's another right above. So there's like a bracket within a bracket. The adoption of textbooks for American history and government is in brackets by the board, and any committee shall be done in a manner with ORS 337260. So the bigger bracket, the adoption of textbooks, falls under ORS 337.260. And within that, it also includes specifically called out American history and government. Okay.
So even above that one, Chris, in that prior paragraph, it just adds students, which I think we would do because we do that as a part of our practice.
Or designate, yeah, that's fine. Let's see. I don't know that we've had students on a committee to do curriculum and instructional type stuff. I'm not sure. So it's a good app. I'm
Yeah,
not sure that we've specifically called them out before. We've provided it for them to, here's what we think will work. You guys play
Give
with
us
it
some
and test it
feedback.
and then bring it back. But I'm not sure that we've had a student.
They haven't been on the committee, and I
No,
don't
it's not
think they would be on the committee.
So this is
but-
more just review by students, just
Yep.
testing it. How
But
does
we
this
are
work
gonna
in?
gather their feedback. We're gonna have a
Got it.
conversation with
Okay.
them, which
Okay.
we've been much more.
In the same way, sorry, pardon me, in the same way with community members.
Yep,
Provide feedback,
exactly.
Students provide
Yep.
feedback. Okay, okay.
We want their voice.
So I
Okay.
think that's all good. The paragraph that next paragraph where
Right.
it's got brackets within brackets is the most complex part of all of this.
Right,
So the first piece of that on a 7-year cycle,
right,
I am actually thinking that we would not add that. And the reason why is with a current situation that we have with our transformative SEL curriculum, we are
Mhm.
looking at kind of trialing something for a shorter period of time
Mhm.
to then be like, is this working for us? Is it not? Rather than making a 7-year commitment.
Okay,
So I would actually propose that we do not bring in that 7-year cycle because it might be,
right. Either we keep something too long.
it potentially could.
Yeah, okay. So then how do we, how do we do it now that we make sure that something's reviewed? If we don't have is it just, it'll be reviewed
Well,
as needed, but even that's real open-ended.
the first sentence, the district will review core instructional materials in
Right.
accordance with the State Board of Education adoption cycle.
Right.
That is a 7-year cycle. So we
It's
are
written.
saying that we will follow the state cycle for review.
Mhm.
That additional sentence, is more, it just feels like it's more definitive that that cycle is even gonna stay 7 years.
Right.
So we could
Oh, so
even
this way
say-
we can just say, so if the state board says, you know what, it changes so fast, we want you to do it on a 4-year. Okay.
Right, we
It
would just
doesn't
then,
change, you can take it on an
We're still
8-year.
gonna follow the
Right.
state board.
Right, okay.
and we could also then hold it to a shorter timeline if we needed to, like we
Exactly.
are in this
Right,
situation.
right,
Well, I
right.
think another example of that, as the board has adopted new standards,
Mhm.
we've actually brought in new curriculum kind of mid-cycle in order to make sure the materials match the standards
Mhm.
as they were established in statute. So
Okay,
it does allow flexibility to bring things in more quickly if needed, as opposed to like wait 7 years.
okay.
It also might be necessary as we have less curriculum funds when we're needing to do things
A little bit.
over multiple years.
Yeah.
So
Um,
I just don't think we want the timeline.
No, and
To be
it also,
that specific.
if something doesn't change significantly and you have to put whatever the cycle is, then it potentially locks us into paying for something, like you said, in the budget year, we might not have it,
Mhm.
versus an opportunity to do it sooner.
Yeah.
Then would we have to do it again? If we did it at like 5 years, would we have to do it again and say, now we've done the 7-year? That would be
Yes.
extra,
Yeah.
right?
And the state has a criteria and the state has processes for us when we can or can't or need an extension.
Uh-huh.
We just have to communicate that. A good example of that was when we slowed down the math adoption because we wanted Spanish materials, right? Like
Right.
that was a reasonable ask and extension. So I
Okay,
think that piece, that was good conversation, but I think that will
okay.
be good. So then this next section, is really the brackets within a brackets. And I don't know that I have concerns with any of it if we just,
I'm curious why American history and government.
Oh, I know.
and I had looked up,
Because I'm looking at OR 3.
mhm,
um, there's a lot of conversation about what people would like for us to have in our schools around American history and government. And it's coming from multiple sources that are not necessarily in what we would be consider the traditional delivery method. And I would want to make sure that across schools, across grades, across whatever, are doing consistent instruction. And that the board is aware of what that is, and that they're gathering the material. We give teachers the freedom to supplement and add to their curriculum or to add to their instruction. But I would just want to make sure that, and I see where I think this is going, to make sure that it's consistent for all the students and that it's not, that the material is there. Does that make sense?
I think I think it's fine to leave it in. I think our board may have questions or conversation about it. Ultimately, if that section was struck, I don't think it would hurt us because we're still held to the ORS.
I
I think
think
it's
the ORS doesn't call out American history and government. They're just saying that the review and adoption should be within that same.
There is a section, textbooks on American history and government.
And I just can't get.
Adequately stress. So we are required to stress the services rendered by those who achieved our national independence, who established our form of constitutional government, and who preserved our federal union. Textbooks and other instructional materials shall adequately address the roles in and contributions to the economic, political, and social development of Oregon and the United States by men and women who are Native American, are European, African, Asian, Pacific Island, Chicano, Latino, Middle Eastern, or Jewish descent, have disabilities, are immigrants or refugees, and are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender.
Okay.
So the ORS holds us to that standard.
Okay.
So I think whether or not it's in the policy is,
So as do the new social science. The new
Mhm.
social science standards that have been adopted by the state hold us to that exact same standard.
So I wonder then if it's just, if other school districts have come into questions and concerns about supplemental American history and government material.
they may.
And so let's leave it in. We'll talk about it with
Just
the board.
leave the whole thing.
Yep, take all the brackets, leave the brackets, and
Anytime there's brackets within the brackets, I'm not sure where one starts.
yeah.
Okay, so the smaller
And then-
paragraph below.
Well, and then there's just that one last, in that same paragraph, that whole paragraph is like full of brackets. Request for consideration, reconsideration may be considered under 2A AR2, reconsideration of court instructional materials.
Mhm.
And that's just being added. And why would that? I guess I haven't looked at that.
The AR.
Yeah, the AR.
They proposed several different ARs, so my
Mhm.
thinking was, let's get the policy and then make sure that the
Okay.
AR aligns. I didn't have concerns looking at AR2.
The only question I would have, and I just about have it up in front of me right now, is what is the difference between a request for reconsider, who's making the request and what are they reconsidering versus a complaint about the curriculum?
So, it's related to core instructional materials.
Right.
So it's not any of the supplemental things and
Right.
it's not any of the teacher selected things.
Okay,
So it's just core that's adopted by the board.
right,
And reconsideration is the name of the process that if someone doesn't like a textbook being used or doesn't like a
Mhm.
novel that's being read in a classroom sort
Right.
of thing, then the reconsideration process is the process they go through and anyone can submit that.
so it's not, but again, so it just feels a little bit odd to have that separate from our regular complaint. This is a more formal because it's adopted curriculum.
Yes,
Okay.
and there's requirements in it that include teachers of that content level, an administrator from that level, like
Okay.
elementary, middle, high,
Okay,
a community member, like it's a little more spelled out, so you have curriculum expertise
right, and not just,
navigating
got it,
that
okay,
as opposed to,
Mm-hmm.
someone who might have an operations background.
Right, okay, okay.
Um,
And the next bracket paragraph, we've done that, haven't we?
we And we may
Independently
choose
adopt,
to
yeah.
independently adopt, and sometimes that is strategic. And there is a state process for that, so we
Okay.
would just follow, it says, state approved selection process.
Okay,
I don't know. I don't know that we need the AR reference on that one. Because that is just that is a state required process. That's not just our
okay.
AR.
Would that, does that wind up going down in? That's all just legal references. Okay. So that, you don't think that needs to be on there?
Let me look. I'm a little bit confused why they have,
Well, it's,
I think it's, if we want that in our AR, then we need to pick the AR number 6 that they've proposed.
uh-huh,
Um. Oh, it's an
Okay.
additional AR.
okay, all right.
It is an AR that is specific to independent adoption of core instructional materials. I
Okay.
missed that, I'm sorry.
And I know, that's terrible. I know the board does not get directly involved with ARs. Because that's a new one being added, should that one be at least attached with this so that somebody doesn't say what's.
Well, I think that's the question. Do we need it attached? Like, do we feel like we need to add that AR?
What is the,
I don't,
what is the AR state? I've seen,
because we don't have a copy of that.
Here, I can actually project it.
Okay.
because I'm curious what it adds beyond simply using the state approved selection criteria.
I think it just
Mhm.
spells out the state approved. So let me see here.
Cause I worry that putting that in there then puts in sort of a, well, what does that say? Why is that in there? Why are we calling that
Mhm.
out when there's other ARs that are associated or other,
So it's specific to
right?
the independent adoption.
Okay,
Tracy, this one is saying the number 3 though, right? And you selected 6. Is there a difference?
it says
core.
number 6.
Oh,
It's,
Oh.
The next
There
one
we
says
go.
number 3.
okay.
yeah, so it's got the ARs listed in
Oh my God,
all
we're
of
gonna
them.
have to list
Yeah.
all these, I think. we're
Yeah,
gonna have to
it's
go
got
through
4
them.
in the last page, so it has, that seems weird now.
So
Now
they're
I'm
pulling
saying
out,
weird.
rather than one big AR.
Right.
They've compartmentalized ARs, I think. So
Okay.
so let's go back. So what they have is they're having us strike the one we currently have.
Right,
And then they've got these other 6, which I assumed were versions, so that. My bad. So this
Okay.
one is the core instructional materials supplemental. This is the stuff we've just talked about.
right,
School library, classroom library, in terms of selection. So we'll need that one.
uh-huh,
Number 2 is the reconsideration process. I think we're gonna probably. So the reconsideration process, so if I want to challenge something that's been picked, then here's the process. So these all. I guess I'm feeling confused on if this is, so IIA has not been a policy that needed approval by the board.
uh-huh.
So I'm wondering if,
So was it, cause it's proposed, so what, have we not ever had one before? Is that-
we have
we
had a
had it,
different
but-
section, so like this, the
Okay.
core this like core materials piece.
Right,
In our current policy, this AR is just long, it's just a long one.
okay,
So it's embedded, so that section is.
It's down
This
below.
whole objection to instructional materials, then it gives the process for reconsideration.
okay,
So it's basically pulled out chunks of this AR that's 6 pages
And split it
long
up.
and
right,
compartmentalized it.
okay. So where, I'm looking on my shared drives, is that where that is that you're looking at?
This one, so on our spreadsheet that we have,
Okay, I'm not sure I'm in the right place then. Right,
so this is more complicated than I thought it was.
It's here. And then our spreadsheet is,
Cause see, Tim, what they sometimes do is they'll give you the same AR and they'll give you like
Okay, okay.
version
Okay.
one.
Oh,
version
this is,
two.
I've
So
seen
I
this one.
assume
and
these
It's
were
it's
versions.
so spread
As
out, right?
opposed to separate
Okay.
chunks.
Yes,
Got it, okay.
Mhm.
I
so,
went to that one, I thought that wasn't it, because it looked too
Yeah.
big. Okay,
And to what extent are these new versus to what extent are they revisions of what's currently in
well,
place?
and they're all optional. Like, all of
Those
these
were rare.
ARs are optional. I haven't seen anything so far that concerns me, but what I'm wondering is if we want to,
there we go.
look at the policy and make sure we don't have concerns as a policy committee about the policy, Chris, and then Tim and Heidi and I can go through the ARs and
Let's
make
do
some
that, yeah.
recommendations and then we can packet that all together to go over with the board.
Yeah, yeah, because that, I think that would work, because I don't think we want to set a precedence for this for going through the ARs.
Right.
However, the board does like to see ARs to
Mhm.
know how is that implementing the policy that you want us to adopt.
Yep, yep.
Makes sense. It
So
makes
then,
sense.
for the purposes of where we're at today, we'll
Uh-huh.
assume that the ARs that they're referencing, we're gonna keep.
Keep, okay.
And then we'll go through them and we will
Okay.
make recommendations on them.
Alright, I'm gonna make a note on this. And that will also, I think, in particular on this one, because it's kind of a big one, that it reinforces that there are multiple processes for reviewing
Mhm.
instructional material, for allowing for input from people about concerns with instructional material.
Yeah.
How it's chosen, why it's chosen, and alternatives.
It makes it more clear, I think, for the
Consistent.
public to navigate.
Yeah, well, for the public and also just in general, any changeovers, it's consistent with here's how it's
Mhm.
done and make sure that everyone knows that it isn't. That would have a pretty picture on the book. We're gonna go ahead and buy that. You know, that there's much deeper process for how we do this. Okay.
But it's also recognizing that there are things that the board has adopted,
Mm-hmm,
and teachers are also going to be supplementing what
Right.
the board has adopted, so differentiate between those as well.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, we will. We
And is
will
it-
work.
Is it a difference then? This is just sort of a general question. We have instructional material, we've adopted it. We have additional material available with the core instruction that the board could review. I'm using my train of thought. But if a single teacher in a single classroom said, we're gonna go ahead and have this in as well, and a parent says, I don't want that, that just stays up at this level, or does that
That
becomes
stays,
a-
starts with the principal.
start
To
to
navigate that.
Okay.
And
But
that's,
because it's not necessarily the adopted, but it's what the teacher says, this will really help me teach the content
Mhm.
in a different,
Mhm.
more concise way. And be able to have that freedom to teach it
Yeah.
and not have the board get into the minutia of
Mhm.
all of that. We're saying, we want you to teach this content this way.
Yep.
If you need to find supplemental things, it should fall within the guidelines of that. And if someone says, I don't understand why you're picking that, then it
Mhm.
stays at your guys' level.
And I think social science is a great example where you have the adopted curriculum, and there are current events that are happening all the time
Mhm,
that provide a nice connection to whatever content or standard is being covered.
mhm.
But current events aren't adopted as part of the curriculum because they're current events,
Right, right.
And so, in social science, I think our teachers are continually trying to make those connections between like, here's what happened then,
Mhm.
and here's a similar thing that's happening now, like where do you see overlaps, where do you see
Right.
differences? And so it's those opportunities where teachers are making the content real live, where it's not gonna be part of the adopted curriculum.
Right.
Because it wasn't present. or
Right,
available for
right.
current event.
Right,
And the
okay.
policy definition does say, materials to supplement and or differentiate for instruction and are generally teacher selected. So it talks about, I mean,
Mhm.
it's not that you're pulling in something random and unattached
Yeah.
to
Right,
your
right.
content.
Okay.
So I think those are all okay. So the supplemental instructional materials section.
Same thing, it's under an AR,
Yep, and I didn't have concerns about that.
okay. And is on the bracket will be selected by teachers, principals, librarians, and or others as determined appropriate. I mean, that
Mhm.
seems like an okay, okay,
And then including, which may not be through any formal selection
Right,
process.
right, okay.
I think that's okay
And do
also.
teachers then, and I don't know, because I don't have kids in direct education anymore. How are parents notified that in a classroom for social studies, we're going to be using, this is the textbook that we're gonna be using? And we'll be supplementing it with news stories, we'll be supplementing it with magazine, we'll be supplementing it with whatever, or through. How do parents know what kinds of supplemental material will be available?
They
Just a
don't. I
general,
mean, I don't think
I've
they,
had teachers email through parents for letting
Okay.
us know. For
Okay.
My kiddo's a junior and her teachers are very good at communicating, like, hey, we're gonna be doing this.
newslettery kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
informal,
Yeah.
But
just
heads up.
Yep.
okay, and that's fine.
And
That's
not
fine.
every time probably either,
No,
you know.
no, sometimes it happens quickly. Hey,
Mhm.
something happened and we're gonna do that. We're switching today to do
Mhm.
something. Okay,
And sometimes it's kids' interest in the moment or how students are responding to something that
Uh-huh.
then you're adapting to
okay,
whatever
okay.
is happening.
And I like your social studies thing because that was my favorite subject as well.
Okay, school library materials. I mean, it's all similar language. I
Right.
think that's fine.
And, um, and I didn't know on this one because it has library materials selected by a librarian.
Mhm.
Request for reconsideration of school library falls under an AR,
Mhm.
but we do have and I don't know which policy it is, but someone can challenge.
That's what this is. So.
That's that's
this
an
one-
AR
this
instead of,
is-
didn't it used to be a standalone policy?
Mm-mm.
It's always been in the AR.
It was all lumped together. So what they
Oh,
did is there's a reconsideration process that's just for library. And
Okay,
now there's a reconsideration process
for classroom library.
for supplemental materials.
Right.
Like all of these different identified
Got it.
group types of content have their own process.
Okay.
But I think it's more about either directing it straight to KL
Right.
or doing this other process.
So Tracy, my
We'll
only
have to dig
question
into
with that,
those.
because I'm looking at the AR, we refer to these as media as opposed to library. So I'm not sure if that makes a difference, because I think because I remember reviewing it specifically, I think we use media on purpose to be more expansive. It's
Mhm.
not just a book,
Uh-huh.
right? We're talking, there's also digital materials and other sorts of things that our librarians are curating. So just you can put an asterisk with that, but I'm curious because in the AR, so media, it
Mhm.
refers to media centers.
We'll need to look for digital stuff, but I would assume,
Digital materials was a separate section.
and it's not in here.
And this isn't, I'm in the AR,
Our current AR,
correct?
yeah, and I don't see it in this policy even, so I'm wondering if it's moved to its own thing, although for instructional materials on the new policy says may include adaptive personalized learning programs, digital textbooks and print textbooks. So it embeds digital.
So if you want to go back to using library, I just want to make sure that we're consistent in our language between the policy and whatever it is.
They will be, because these ARs are all from OSBA.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, so ours currently will just go, and we would likely just replace all of it.
So I'm reading this one real quick.
So Tim, I think we are gonna need to do a quick review of 6 ARs and anything that's bracketed, like what I had done is just walk through and put yes, no, yes, no. And I'll do it as well, and we can kind of loop back and see.
Yeah.
The classroom library materials, all those brackets get, yes,
Yeah,
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cause yeah, didn't this, I'm just looking at this, the one that they're calling AR number. 4.
Yeah,
3, 4, 4.
so number 4.
So did that used to be, I'm just trying to figure out, because I thought that used to be just a standalone policy.
It was lumped into so in our current AR, there, it references library as a part of. Let's see, request for reconsideration. There's the form. Let's see. So procedure for selection, it talks about library collections in our current AR. Objections.
Because I know, from a board perspective, my recollection is we've only had a book challenge is what my mind is telling me. We've only had 2 of those in 20+ years. And we had the committee, we had the review, and especially, and it says this in the AR, the book stays
Yeah,
available during the review process. It's not pulled by one person's request to pull material. And then it goes through the committee made up of the folks that it has in there that I remember. And then I just remember one of them coming to the board for a report on reviewing it, and the recommendation from the committee was to leave the material as is, and the parent who was concerned would request their child to not have access to that material, which is always an option.
And we've navigated that on
Yeah,
some case by case.
But I just was
things
thinking
don't
that
go
was a
far.
separate policy, independent of this, that it was a procedural policy. What do you do when there's a challenge to material?
Yeah, that's,
And so that's why I was just thinking that it was a separate, I didn't remember it being this
embedded
long.
in this, yeah.
Right, okay. So it'll be embedded now instead of, it'll still be separate.
It's still
So-
part of this policy, but that's what all these ARs are.
Right,
Are pulling out pieces to make it more clear. If I want to challenge a library book, then I'm going to use this AR.
right.
If I want to challenge a core curriculum, I'm going to use this AR. So that's what these are doing. So, this is our delete. So this one is if I want to challenge a classroom library material, what is my process? If I want to talk about reconsideration of supplemental instructional material, this is my process. So it just
Right.
teases out each of those. Here's school or classroom library.
So I guess I'm just curious, I'm looking at it from a public standpoint. If someone's concerned about what they think is in the library, how would they know?
So the policy here references the ARs. And then there is an AR that's specific to the library. I have too many tabs open. Oh, I've got that one open like 3 times. Which one on the library? For school library materials,
Is
it
AR4.
references AR. This is why I have so many tabs. So AR4. So they will see this AR, reconsideration of school or classroom library.
Okay,
Chris, I think I understand your question.
you understand my question?
So what-
Those are big, those are education words. Someone's upset and wants to pull a book from the library. How are they gonna know reconsideration for instructional materials to A4?
So
They're not gonna find it.
when you look on the policy webpage.
Yeah, and that's why I can't get to it, but yes.
Yes, so on the policy webpage, it'll have the initial document of II or whatever we're working on.
Okay,
IIAA,
okay,
IIA.
Yeah.
And then underneath it, like even right now, you'll see the first one that will say reconsideration of classroom materials. Or
Okay.
reconsideration of library materials.
Okay.
Or reconsider, like, it'll list out, I think in plain language,
Uh-huh.
what each of those
got it.
would be.
Well, and honestly, if a parent has a concern about a text, hopefully their first call is to their teacher or to the principal, right?
yes.
or to
Yes.
district office
However-
to help guide
However,
towards.
and maybe I'm just, I'm in the environment that we're in, that complaint may not come from a parent. That complaint may come from somebody that is
Mhm.
not in our district even.
Mhm.
And so how, having a very clean process for how we do it, that someone can't come in and say, I don't want that book on
Mhm.
that list. Then it goes through, well, do we clarify? Are you in our district? If you're not, do we even consider it? Are you a parent of a student? Are you a guardian? Are you related to a student who is engaged in that book?
Mhm.
It's just kind of trying to make sure that the decisions we make are the decisions that are made for the district and for
Within
our
our community.
students. Yeah, with our community. And again.
I would
we've
need to
had
read
very few-
all the ARs. in
Yeah,
more
we've just
detail,
had very
but-
few, challenges to things because I think we
Okay,
do a
here.
very good job in reviewing and doing stuff.
Any staff member, student, or their parent or guardian or resident of the district may raise concerns about the materials available.
Okay,
This procedure is to provide a forum for those persons in the schools and the community who are not directly involved in the selection process. So I feel like that paragraph right there
uh-huh,
limits it to what you're describing.
Okay.
That it's not someone who might be unfamiliar with our standards or.
right, okay. That, again, just making sure that we have it, it's
Yeah.
consistently applied, that someone, because I appreciate that in our district, until the review is done, the book stays available.
Yeah.
The book is not automatically pulled and then not returned because the committee never finishes.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like this, that we have it set up in a way that says, okay, we'll review it. Good to
Mhm.
review what we have, what we're looking at, how does it fit? And if it fits, then it stays.
Yeah.
And then someone can say, I don't want my child to have it. Okay, that's a
And
different
I do know
conversation.
that that was spelled out in one of these.
Uh-huh,
So it is in here.
I think
Okay.
our current guidance is to
It's in our
make sure that it
current.
can't be pulled until the committee.
But that's a state recommendation also.
there we go. Okay.
So,
There we go. So we got it. Because I'm going through the website
mhm,
and I started with complaint.
mhm,
Then it said about what? A book. And then
mhm,
it takes me to instructional resources and it takes me to 2A,
mhm,
AR.
mhm.
Okay,
Nice.
we're good. Okay, but I could find it using the words that I would be familiar with
Right.
using. Okay,
That's great.
I wouldn't look up instructional resources.
Yeah.
I'd look
Right.
up book and
Right.
it worked.
That's
So,
great.
Okay.
I didn't know it would do that.
And then there it is, right there, instructional materials selection, and it has it right there. Okay, perfect.
Okay, so we are saying policy to the work session in May, and we're saying that ILT, meaning Tim, Tracy, maybe Heidi, will review
Tim Tracy and Heidi.
the ARs to have them available
Right.
on that one.
Woo. So what's our time? Because you said you had a time issue. Thank you for coming, Dr. Collins. We've taken up a bunch of time going. Are there more that we have to do with you as well?
Graduation.
Yeah.
And I think it can be, I think we resolved a lot of things last time.
Okay,
Even looking through, I have some recommendations.
okay,
so we had, the questions we had lingering were related to, basically page 7, 8, and 9, where there were questions.
Can I go back to page 2 really quick?
Yeah.
So where you have listed out the credits related to high school diploma,
Mm-hmm.
I would remove any language that's not exactly what's in ODE's language on the website. So for example, it says 4 credits of language arts. I would leave it with that and remove and include the equivalent of 1 unit in good composition. It's not required by ODE. So we do that as is, and then for the 3 credits of math. ODE's new language must be Algebra 1 and above. So instead of shall include 1 unit of Algebra 1, 2 units that are a level higher than Algebra 1. Like saying Algebra 1 and above some of the plus ones should be not a relearning, but a using of algebra concepts as opposed to using algebra 2 or other concepts. And so I think the language.
So just strike the parentheses.
Well, I think you would put must be algebra 1 and above in the
you want to
parentheses
match
for
that?
mathematics specific. So I would match.
So
It's
we,
just like the-
yeah, we went through the chart last time and didn't. The conversation was really about the notes on the chart are probably not relevant to the policy per se. Cause we went back and forth about, do we add just the chart? So, and then not having the links in there as well. So,
Then I would just go with the subject area and requirements and leave it
Mhm.
at that. I think it keeps it fun. That's what I would do.
what are your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah. I can go either way on that. Just looking at it from again, a parent or student perspective, I have to take one algebra 1 class and 2 higher than algebra 1.
Mhm.
So,
Well, it can be at algebra 1 standards or algebra 1 level. So some of the plus ones that we're proposing, so in the new 2+1 model,
okay,
financial algebra, no, math for the trades, for example,
okay,
is actually heavily based on content that a student would have learned in algebra 1. So it's an application of algebra 1 content, so it's not higher than algebra 1.
oh.
It's using
okay.
algebra 1 content in a hands-on or in a contextual manner.
So it's above algebra 1,
That's where I think the challenge comes in.
yeah,
The state flexibility says it's algebra 1 and above. Where this
and
one says,
above.
yeah, where this one says this shall include 1 unit of algebra 1 and then 2 units that are a level higher than.
Is that's in the standards,
Yes,
but no, not ORS.
correct.
So what I'm wondering is if we do strike it on language arts and on math, but we leave it for social sciences on the next page because those pieces are legislated at this point. We leave the requirements around.
Right, because
Yeah.
those are what
Financial
we have to
literacy.
have, yeah,
Um,
okay.
and where,
And so are there, um,
well, but that's
so
really
then we're
shall
duplicating
include.
financial education.
It said we don't need the.
Yeah, we
financial
don't need
literacy
any of those
piece.
parentheses, do we?
I
and
think
then
I
3
think you need the
credits.
parentheses off. I'm only commenting if
On
you're gonna
number
have the
5?
parentheses.
On number 5, just leave them all off,
And career pathways, yeah, I'm with you, Tim.
just 3 credits in social sciences.
Yep,
Because we know that it has to include 0.5 in civics.
and it does specifically call out personal finance and career pathways, which are the new pieces for Senate Bill 3
Right, right.
as independent things.
Does it need to keep if the US civics credit is a requirement? Does that stay in there and then 2.5 additional social science? Is that what it's saying, basically?
It's saying out of the 3 credits of social science, at least half
Is
a
it,
credit will be a civics.
so does that need to be called out and then the rest of it doesn't?
We could do that,
Yeah, we could leave the civics in.
like includes, like not,
That shall include 0.5 units of US civics in the parentheses.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh,
and then strike this part.
yeah,
The rest.
that just makes
Okay.
it simpler.
It does,
Okay,
And
and
then
then a half
even-
credit. And a half credit,
Yeah, those are fine.
and so okay, yep, that's it.
Okay.
And health is different than PE.
And the other thing that does is it gives us flexibility because ODE, I can look back over my 4 or 5 years in this position. Like the math language changed 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Like ODE is continually updating the parentheses, so to speak. This keeps
Okay.
us from having to update our policy every time ODE makes a
Right,
change.
right, okay,
oh, they send it to us every time.
Oh, I
Yeah.
know.
yeah,
I think we've done this policy every year and it's like the
Okay.
longest policy we have.
because it kind of falls in, I mean, just. Because it just says 3 credits of science, and it doesn't make us put in this kind of science and that kind of science, and this chemistry or
Science is
whatever,
science.
science is science.
And the same thing's true with social science.
Right,
Like it
right,
doesn't specify it has to be so many credits of
So
right,
for number one and number two, we're taking off all the parentheses.
yes,
That's what I would do.
yeah, yeah.
And we'll strike the little squiggly, the info bracket 6. It's basically if the district has additional graduation requirements, add them.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
we'll
that's-
strike that.
yeah.
Okay.
And then it down below also. And then, so Tim, did you see something else?
So that's awesome. And now you said to page 8.
Page 7. Okay, wait, let's hang on a second, because on page five.
Mhm.
So for modified diploma,
Mhm.
2 credits in social science. We don't need the parentheses on number 4.
Oh, which
Right.
may include whatever.
Mhm.
Yep.
So we'd strike that to kind of
Okay.
keep in alignment with the other. Um,
Okay. The other two on 5 and 6, those are specifically required.
mhm.
Okay.
Those are add-on.
Okay.
Okay. So then it was page 7. The essential skills section. Just to confirm, Tim, the district will allow ELL students to demonstrate proficiency in essential skills in their language of origin. We already have like a guidance paper around that, I believe.
If there is, I can see.
Isn't that some of the,
There's the linguistic inclusion paper,
okay,
but it doesn't necessarily.
essential skills?
And this,
But we need to work towards
I don't
that.
see why we wouldn't, because the
Uh-huh.
essential skills, if we're talking about language arts as opposed to English language arts,
Mhm.
we should be able to apply the essential skills from the students'
Mhm.
language of origin for sure.
And with DLI, I think that's.
Yes,
mhm,
so I think will makes perfect sense.
mhm.
And then the other question, we looked at essential skills appeal. So if a student has not met it and a family wants to appeal, I don't know that we need a separate appeal process. We have so many complaint and appeal processes, so I would recommend
keeping
the
it with
brackets
KL.
around policy KL.
Okay. So then do we need to look at KL and make sure that, I don't wanna do a laundry list, but I suppose a complaint is a complaint.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I think that
And
was,
do we get many of those in this particular category?
Well, we haven't done essential skills for 4 years,
Okay.
Yeah.
since 2020,
Because of
5 years.
and it's not scheduled to be back for,
until
Couple more.
2027 at the earliest.
Okay,
and it could just go
And it may
away.
just go away altogether.
got it. Oh, okay, okay, all right.
So I think we could just leave that. There's the little squiggly brackets at the bottom.
Okay.
Really quick, under extended diploma, instead of 3 credits of history, geography, economics, or civics, should we just say 3 credits of social science, but then just the rest? No, I'm saying social science elsewhere. Yeah, we said, social science for the modified diploma
Yeah,
on page 5.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was page 7, and then on page 8. There were questions around the attendance part, and Tim, this is where I really needed your help.
Are you talking certificate of attendance?
Yes, and some of, at the bottom, it talks about certificate of attendance. It also, we had questions, so have maintained regular full-time attendance for at least 4 years, beginning in grade 9. And one of the questions was, do we mean physical attendance, or does that mean it could be hybrid, right? I would assume it's either, and does that need to be spelled out somehow?
So when I think about this, I think about if a student is being counted as present, regardless of how they show up,
Okay,
right? If they're being marked as present within synergy, which could be within a hybrid sort of setting.
okay.
And this is this basically in lieu of a diploma scenario? It's you attended,
Mhm.
you didn't necessarily get all of the, because this was the conversation I walked in.
Yeah.
Not intentionally, I had something
Yeah.
else. But that's what that is it's, you came, you learned, you
Mhm.
just didn't get to a full diploma scenario, but you still
Mhm.
get something that documents that you participated.
Yeah,
And I think a great
You still get
example,
to
yeah, students in our
participate.
LE2 program
Uh-huh,
would be a great example.
okay,
It's like
okay.
they showed up,
they still get to be a
Every
part of the pomp and
They go
Yeah,
circumstance
yeah,
at the
it's
end
a
of the year.
celebration of
Yep.
achievement.
yeah,
Yep.
Whatever the celebration, whatever the achievement, it's a celebration of
Yep.
achievement.
Yes.
Okay,
And it also requires that there's lots of communication with parents in terms of determining that pathway so that parents are
Right.
fully aware that that's the case.
yes.
right.
So at the very bottom of the page, the footnote defines regular full-time attendance as not being absent for more than 10% of school days. And really kind of that chronic absenteeism, and I'm just not.
So I think is the
Oh.
last sentence of that excused absences.
That's the part.
Yeah, because I would presume that a student who is going to be in this particular category may have health issues
Exactly.
that do not allow for what we would consider full-time attendance,
Mhm.
but it would be excused.
Yes. So those would
And
not-
so,
So we would strike the are considered absences for this purpose bracket and accept the will not be counted against the student.
right,
bracket.
right.
Okay, that
right.
feels way better to
That feels way better because it still says,
me.
don't stop attending and doing because you've hit this 10%.
Right,
Or who decides
right.
you were approved, excused, not,
Mhm.
it just feels a little arbitrary.
Yeah, because if it's excused, that means there's communication between a family and a school about
Yeah,
whatever a student.
yeah.
There's a legitimate reason for the student not
Yeah.
being present.
Right.
Okay, those
okay.
were our questions from before. We had talked
Okay.
about adding that chart and then we decided not to add that chart.
Right, because the
So-
chart then has to be adopted.
Adopted every year. That's
Yes.
ODE updates the chart.
Yeah,
And we don't usually put links, so
right, okay.
I think the rest looked good.
And it's the last, on page 11, is we don't call it Smarter Balance in the Oregon Extended Assessment, it's just Oregon Statewide Assessment, whatever
Mhm.
they call it.
Whatever it is.
Okay. And do we have, is opt-out pretty high, or is it kind of settled down? Are there a lot of kids who opt out?
It varies by school.
Okay,
Okay, those were the two meaty ones.
okay,
I believe in us getting through a couple
Yep.
more real
yep,
fast.
yep.
All right,
Five.
I'll let you finish.
Thank you,
Thank
Tim.
you, thank you.
The staff HIV AIDS one
Oh, Rebecca, right?
is just, it's a delete the policy, and we did reach out, like, why are we deleting this?
Right, because it got incorporated into the level.
Yep, so it says, the rule was revised and the requirement for a policy on this topic is removed.
Okay,
So that feels
Okay.
pretty straightforward to go to the work session.
all right.
The students, with section 504
Uh-huh,
is really, it's just a language change from in how they're referencing students who qualify for section 504 versus section 504 qualified students. So there's just some semantics thing
So
there.
what's in that second sentence where it's Americans with Disabilities Act?
There are amendments that, yeah,
Right, but I mean, but it's Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act. Is that what it is of 2008? Is that the same?
let me look it up real
I mean, it seems like, I don't know why there's what's there an act before? And if 2008 is still.
quick. That there is an Amendments Act of 2008, so that is
Okay,
correct.
got it, okay.
The other thing that's important on here is the footnote. There's an added footnote of an ORS.
343, okay.
And that one is some of the legislative changes we had around classified staff being invited to IEP meetings, being able to provide input. So
Okay.
it just, that's what that
One
added
more
is,
set of people that engage with the student.
Yep.
Okay.
that they're invited to the process.
Okay. So is that something, side note, that'll have to be incorporated into their,
There's
Contract.
already
It's
an
already
MOU, or
language.
it might be in the contract
Okay.
already.
okay,
Okay.
okay,
There's been work around that for sure.
okay.
So that one can go to the work session. And then compulsory attendance, we talked extensively about,
Yeah,
and I kept going round and round with this one.
right.
Really, so when we left our meeting, we feel like the policy was okay. It was more about review the AR and then bring it back to the committee.
Okay,
And so we had some different folks vet the AR.
okay,
And I struggled with this because we don't do this.
right.
So-
It put us in a weird position of looking for an opportunity to find or harm someone in trying to get them back to school versus.
Yeah.
Why aren't you here?
Right.
What can we do to make it available for you?
Yeah.
It felt, and I think that was when I remember leaving the conversation for the other meeting, that it felt old school. It felt
Well-
old style of a, where they.
Super punitive, let's punish you for not coming to
Yeah,
school,
yeah,
and then
you
wanna come to
you already
school.
don't wanna come, let's make it even worse when you do show up
Yeah.
and, yeah, it just didn't seem like it. But I also get, you're not learning if you're not in school, what's preventing you from being able to
Right.
participate? What can we do to offer different scenario, different setting,
Yeah.
something, what's not working
Yeah.
in this?
So where I landed was our policy is really about, hey, you need to come to school.
Right,
And if you don't come to school, there are some steps that we can take. And the AR, there is that one in the very middle of the policy page, a citation for violation of ORS 339.035
right,
may be issued. This is where the AR comes in.
okay.
If we were in a position where we decided that we were going to offer citations, then
Uh-huh.
the AR provides the process.
Okay,
And so from that standpoint, the AR looks okay in terms of it provides the notices that are required in different things, but it's not an AR that we have to implement because it starts in the policy as we may do it. So
right,
we have permission to do it.
right.
And so then the AR is like, if we do it, here's the process for how we will do it.
And I'm just kind of, playing out scenarios. A student up to a certain age doesn't have physical control over getting to school. They're not the ones that are preventing themselves from being able to get to school. A 7-year-old is not preventing themselves.
Yeah.
So it's having the conversation with whoever the guardian or adult is in their life that says
Yep.
they really need to go to school, one way or another. Either registered with the ESD for homeschooling under curriculum, coming to school, what's the barrier for getting you to school?
Yep.
It allows that conversation.
Yep.
And then if they don't, if they still say, then we have to go to a means of, and what? I didn't read all.
There's
what
nothing
is a
that,
citation?
there's nothing that says we have to go to the citation
Right.
process. And in Multnomah County, the citation process has not been supported for a number of years
I agree.
by
Yeah, Yeah,
Um,
it doesn't feel like it's gonna solve the problem.
Right,
It just feels like it does give an entryway to say, we know your child is not attending.
yeah,
What can we do to help?
right,
Without making the family feel, that if they let their child go or whatever it is they need to do, that somehow they're gonna get in trouble.
Yeah.
And that can cause them to hide even more.
Mhm.
Then we really don't know.
Right.
Um,
but because because there is an ORS saying that we can do that,
right.
then it makes sense to have an AR that holds us
Right.
accountable for how we would do that, because it does require things like notification with parents and, all the things that you would expect if some of those steps that would need to be happening prior to such a notice.
Right, and so I'm looking at this real quick, because the things that we just said. Can or should it be in the policy that the goal of the Gresham-Barlow School District is to engage and support all students in our district? And as part of that, we want you to get here. I mean, is there any way of putting in a statement that says, our goal is not to make money off of you not showing up at school because we're gonna issue a citation or some kind of notice that's going to get you into trouble? We want students to come and we want to work with families to see why they're not getting here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where that falls. And I realize it's a policy and it's
Yeah.
legal.
I guess I am wondering if that is part of the may be issued, like a citation may be issued, like we can, and our
Right.
practice is not to,
Right. We don't want to also.
but we don't want to say our current practice is that we don't do this.
Exactly. Or that we're not going to, because then it's harder to have the conversation that says, we really need your kid here.
Mhm.
We really don't want to go down the path of having to do something else. We
Right.
really would like to figure out how your student can be part of school.
Yeah.
And is it, does it run the gamut of anything from younger kids not coming to older students and?
It's 6 through 18.
Okay, all right. And is it a lot?
Of students that are not,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we would have
Really?
40% of our district would be,
Really?
technically, if we were gonna like
Follow
buy
these
the
girls
books,
Yeah,
and that, it would be 40% of our district right now.
that would be getting.
Yeah, that's a different kind of
Yeah,
problem
yeah.
than a citation is gonna fix.
Right. And I wouldn't want it to start with, hi, we're here from the government to help you.
Right.
That
Right.
doesn't bode well either. If there's already a reason for not coming, us coming heavy-handed with, we're gonna do something that's going to affect you financially or otherwise, housing or,
Right.
Cause I don't know even what a citation means. What is that? What
A
does it-
fine
it's a.
and
fine.
a visit to court to be scolded by a judge.
Okay, none of that feels good. No, that's not gonna have somebody say, okay, I'll get my kid to school.
Let's
now."
partner and.
Yeah, it's gonna be hiding even more.
So yes or no on the bracket, no?
On the bracket, I think yes,
Yeah.
on the
Yes,
May.
it needs to stay in there
Just
as a
to be
May,
there.
because if we take it out, then we have no team,
Right.
and we have nothing. So, yeah, okay.
Okay, so that means all of those go to work session.
Yay.
And I think Cindy, that completes the ones that were required or.
There's
I
one that we
recommend-
need to approve for the one under it to pass. Through, those that go hand in hand.
Oh, yeah.
There was one that Sarah and I found,
That you
so
found, okay, so we will need to have another policy meeting,
Okay,
and we will also, the board had asked us to have a conversation around naming of facilities. So
Right.
at our work session, we'll gather feedback,
yeah,
and then at our next policy meeting, we can start to kind of work through.
because it was
that.
it's that twofold, it was the naming of facilities and commemorative.
Yes, yep. So that's on our work session agenda to just kind of have a broader
Okay,
conversation with
okay.
the board.
Okay.
So we will need another policy committee meeting in June.
Okay.
And then we'll be caught up till we get to the next round.
Okay, so are we going, how are we going to figure out when that June meeting will be? Do we have a
Is it-
suggested date? And I know we start getting into graduations and stuff, but certainly for me, oh, and we have the 19th as a holiday for you guys, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. So we kind of have the week, well, we've got graduation, but whatever.
6th and 13th are booked for me.
Uh-huh,
Could do the 20th.
no, we can. I'll be getting a new hip.
Oh,
that day.
that's when you're,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
So we're gonna need to look at something that's not a Friday then.
Yeah, and you know, a Monday works for me sometimes better than the Friday.
Okay.
I mean, the mornings work. This was early. How did we get an 8 o'clock time?
And we're gonna have to revisit this for next year.
Yeah, but actually it's
Um,
okay. Cause if it's 8, I can do any day normally. Mondays, I have more flexibility throughout the day because those are days the store isn't open.
Do you have flexibility then Monday afternoons also?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the afternoon of the night?
Yep.
Like maybe
Yep,
you usually are back from 1:30, right? So maybe 1:30 or 2,
Okay.
2 o'clock,
2 o'clock works. Yeah,
2 o'clock on the night.
yeah, yep.
Fine.
And by then, I'm sort of guessing. Let's see.
That'll
Just
also
another-
give us time if we need to bring something to the work session. The
Right.
18th.
Right. Okay, and I'm sort of assuming by that point, potentially, I shouldn't assume, but Myra may be in full getting ready for her new.
Are we
Position.
off?
Go ahead.